Hello and welcome back to a new season of the Intel with Greg Cosell. I'm Jeff Mosher. I'm with Adam Kaplan. And of course, we can't do this show without the star from NFL Films. He's a senior producer there. And of course, co-host of the matchup show on NFL matchup show on ESPN. We've got Greg Cosell back for another season of one of our favorite shows, the Intel with Greg Cosell. And Greg, in this episode and the next one, we're going to do 2 episodes worth of free agency recap and get your intel, your tape-based observations on what the Eagles and some other teams do in free agency. So the Eagles, not like last year, they've been bargain shopping in free agency. We'll talk about their signing of running back AJ Dillon, their trade for Kenyon Green, the guard, and then most recently their signing of Josh Uche, the pass rusher. And then we'll get into some other free agent moves and trades around the NFC East. So why don't we start with AJ Dillon? That was sort of the biggest, splashiest name of the additions so far for the Eagles. What has been your tape observations of him?
You know, it's funny. I remember doing him in detail coming out of Boston College, and I actually liked him coming out of Boston College for what he is. I mean, obviously, he's a big feature tight back runner. I forget what his measurables were, but he was probably in the 230 range. I thought he actually, believe it or not, had pretty light feet for a big back when I did his tape at BC. And then he became part of a back rotation in Green Bay. And then didn't he miss all of this past season? Yes. So, he's coming off an injury. To me, he's not Saquon Barkley. So I don't want people to think I'm saying he's Saquon Barkley. But to me, he's the same kind of player in the sense that he's really, to me, more of a feature back type in terms of his traits. Now, again, we don't know what their plan is for Will Shipley. They may love Will Shipley and feel he steps easily into the Kenneth Gainwell position. And therefore, they have, in a sense, their 1-2. Maybe they feel that Barkley, coming off a year in which he was such a workhorse and they don't want him to have as many touches next year, feel that Dillon is a guy you can put in, maybe 2 possessions a game just to give Barkley a rest. We don't know the exact plans right now, but to me, he fills more of a Barkley role. He certainly does not fill a Gainwell role, which leads me to believe that they feel Shipley is that guy. Or again, it's a big running back draft class. We're speaking on, in mid-March. We don't know what they're going to do in the draft, but he does not fill the Gainwell role. I think that's the important point.
Yeah, because Kenny did so many things: 2-minute, 4-minute, short yardage, third down, also kickoff returns if you need him to. So yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot they're missing. But one of the other moves, which is interesting, where they traded away C.J. Gardner-Johnson to the Texans. In terms of players they got back, they got one. Kenyon Green, a former first-round pick, Greg.
Yeah.
He's been hurt the last couple of years, and he got benched after he got back last season. What are your thoughts on him?
This is a Stoutland University trade because he's a first-round pick and it was on merit. I mean, he was not a reach when he was drafted in the first round. Most people believe that he was a first-round value, that he was a really good prospect coming out of college, and it just – again, I'm not going to sit here and fancy myself as an offensive line guru as to why it hasn't worked, but watching his tape, boy, does he struggle in pass protection. Now, I can't sit here and tell you the exact reasons. Maybe when they have Jeff Stoutland break down his tape, Stout says, hey, I can fix that in 2 weeks. That's the stuff we don't know, how coaches look at those things. I've had those conversations with O-line coaches where some tell me, just what I said. Hey, I can fix that in 2 weeks. And sometimes they say, I can't fix that. That's, Adam, I know you talk to O-line coaches that, Jeff, you probably do too. You hear those kinds of things. I'm not well schooled enough in the techniques and every mechanic of O-line play to know the answer to that. But they would not have made that trade, I guarantee, without Stoutland putting his stamp on it, believing that they could turn this guy's traits, which were first round, into a quality player. So, obviously they believe that can happen. So that's, beyond that, I don't know if there's much more to say. They believe this guy can ultimately, with Jeff Stoutland's tutoring, become, if not a first round type player, but a starting quality player in the league. He's not old.
I wonder at all, Greg, about scheme change. Sometimes that can help a player because the Texans were that wide zone type of Shanahan running system right, under Clint Kubiak, or not, I'm sorry, Bobby Slowick, and maybe coming over to the Eagles. And this works for AJ Dillon because I believe the Packers, Greg, ran a lot of inside zone and duo. So that'll be a very comfortable move for him, right?
Yeah. I mean, you know, you have to remember this kid came out of Texas. I remember doing him coming out of college. I mean, this kid's big. I mean, he's probably 325 pounds. I think he's only 23, 24 years old.
24, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a young kid. I mean, this guy was a 2-time consensus All-American. Not that means, you know, again, now we're in the NFL, but you know what I'm saying. You know, this guy was considered a really meaningful prospect coming out of college. There was no sense that this guy was not going to be a good player. I mean, I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but I'm trying to remember back when I did him. I remember him having really long arms for a guard. And you know, I don't know if you guys want to pull that up, but I mean, that's just what I remember. And, you know, he had the NFL ready body. I mean, this guy was a strong run blocker. You know, he had some issues. The big issues I remember watching his tape with Houston was he had some serious problems in pass protection. And then that's, you know, that was the issue for him.
What are good, what's a good arm length, Adam, for a guard? Anything about over what?
It's probably 34.
Yeah, he was 34 1/8 with a 6'11" wingspan.
Oh, no.
So it might just be that his arm or his hands. Well, he does have big hands, but a lot of offensive linemen.
I mean, his college tape was first round tape. I can tell you that. Good. You know, and then again, you never know what happens when a guy gets to the league. You know, maybe it's coaching, maybe, like I said, but I think we would all agree. Wouldn't all three of us agree that Jeff Stoutland had to put a stamp on this?
Yes, and by the way, Greg, let's not forget, they've gone through a lot of coaching changes. The Texans have. Before D'Amico Ryan's area, they went back-to-back years or close to it. So they made a lot of changes over the years. So we'll see. It's a new lease in life. He just turns 24 this week. So
there you go. But I mean, his
young guy.
He had first-round tape coming out of Texas A&M. I mean, there's no question about it. He was not a reach.
Stoutland has a chance to even his record with former first-round picks. He started off 0-2 with Warmack and with Andre Dillard, but certainly Mekhi Becton, big hit, and if he can get Green to become a starter and play functional, that'll look.
And who probably was traded to replace Mekhi Becton.
Well, we'll see. I mean, Tyler Steen's still there, and we'll see.
Yeah, I mean,
at least to give him a dart throw there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So let's get into the trade the Eagles made, Greg. Obviously, when they moved Kenny Pickett to the Cleveland Browns, that cleared the way for Tanner McKee, someone we've all talked about on past shows, to become the number 2 quarterback. But they did bring back Dorian Thompson-Robinson, DTR, as he's known in the NFL circles, who was a UCLA quarterback who's been with the Browns. He hasn't played much, Greg, but when he has played, what has the tape showed?
Well, I think you have to think of it in terms of what they see. I mean, the tape in and of itself shows a quarterback that just doesn't see it well. But we know that the Eagles, with the run game and with the quarterback run game as a foundation of what they do, you know, there's so many more elements to the Eagles offense that flow through Jalen Hurts, obviously. Now, this kid is nowhere near Jalen Hurts by any stretch of the imagination, but they really help the quarterback with what they can do with their run game, of which the quarterback is a part, and it's really difficult to defend. So there's probably a sense in the building that, and McKee will be number 2 and deserves to be, but if they did have to play DTR, that in a sense they could run a lot of what they run. It's just he doesn't see the field. And that's why he'll never be a starting quarterback in the league. He just doesn't see the field. And that's so evident on tape. And he's gotten some meaningful opportunities. It's not just as if he's played 1 or 2 games. He's gotten some meaningful opportunities, and there really has not been a lot of improvement in his ability to drop back, see the field, and make throws to the right receiver at the right time with the right kind of throw. It's just not there. You know, again, he's a number 3 on this team. Tanner McKee is really well thought of. When he had to step into play this year, he looked like a veteran. Obviously, he's not Jalen Hurts, but he looked like a veteran who knew where to go with the football. I mean, we saw that when he played. It did not look like a young guy just out there uncertain as to what to do. So, you know, they feel really, really comfortable with him at number 2.
All right, Jeff, you want to move to the next team? Want to go to Commandos?
Absolutely. Let's talk, Greg. We'll go into the NFC East and talk about some of the signings. Obviously, the Commanders, Greg, made the NFC Championship, had a great year with Jaden Daniels, their rookie quarterback. They are coming, at least trying to come, for the Philadelphia Eagles. The first big move they made was a trade to acquire Deebo Samuel. And I was very interested to ask you about this. I know it's very easy to pile on a guy when he's coming off of a bad year, but did the tape of the 49ers show that Deebo Samuel had either lost it or was not the player that he once was?
You know, I would say that's not necessarily true. I think there's a perception that was wrong about Deebo Samuel because of the fact that he was so multi-positional and multi-dimensional in how he was deployed. I think people got the sense that he was a number one receiver. And that's the way he was thought of by people. He's not a number one receiver. He's a system piece that's really good. And he will not be the number one receiver in Washington because they have Terry McLaurin. So it's a really good spot for him. And he fits really well with the fact that they have a quarterback run game, because now you can move him around. You can get him involved in the jet sweep elements, all those things that impact defenses. But he's not, you know, like I said, I think because I do San Francisco radio, and there was a definite sense out there that, oh my God, this guy's like, you know, he should be talked about like he's Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, and he's not playing that way, so therefore he's no good. Well, he's not that guy. Right. You know, he's really kind of a cool system piece. I mean, he's phenomenal run after catch. That's the strength of his game. You know, he's so physical, so tough, so competitive. But as a pure receiver, he's not that guy. So, you know, so I think once you accept as to who he is, he's a good football player. And you know, obviously there he's not going to be the quote unquote number one. So it's a good move for them.
Adam, to Greg's point, you remember when Deebo got that contract, which he had to, like, you know, become the squeaky wheel for, that was coming off a year where he was used as a rack wide receiver, as Greg said, getting yards after the catch, but also he spent a lot of time that year moonlighting as a running back and taking a lot of hits. And so they gave him this big contract. And as we talk about, sometimes contracts make people think that a player is elite at, you know, that position more so than an what his value is to the all-around offense. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, I was going to say, Greg, when you look at Washington with Cliff Kingsbury, I think it's actually a good spot. Cliff, what are your thoughts with Cliff with Samuel?
I mean, Cliff's very creative in the way he uses players. I think that's another reason I think they made the trade, is because they have a plan. And, you know, we don't know exactly what it is. It's March. They're not going to make a public announcement. But I think that I guarantee that when you make a trade for a player like Deebo, they know what people in the league know what he is, you know. So I think that they clearly have a plan for how he'll be deployed within the context of their offense. And you know, I think that'll work out really well. You know, they obviously traded for Tunsil as well, which was kind of a big surprise. When I saw that, I was surprised. But, you know, Tunsil's an interesting guy. He did not have a great year in Houston, but his traits are probably top 3 in the league at the left tackle position. They also knew that Brandon Coleman, the rookie who they had to play at left tackle, I think he can be a very good guard, but he's not a tackle, and they knew that.
So Greg, when you say the tape wasn't very good, we know that the Texas offensive line struggled mightily last season. There were all sorts of problems. But what did you see, or what do you recall were issues with Tunsil?
I thought Tunsil, for the first time that I can really remember, had some issues with speed to power. There were too many times where he got pushed, you know, I don't want to say like driven on his rear end, you know, I mean, not like that, but that doesn't happen in the league, but just pushed back into the pocket, you know, and normally you never saw that. And again, as I was mentioning with Kenyon Green, I'm not enough of an offensive line technique expert to sit here and give you all the reasons why, but he just didn't look the same to me, because Tunsil in years past, like when I watched Stroud, when I spent last summer watching Stroud's rookie year, when I watched like 7 or 8 games in a row, because I can do that in the summer, I can't do that during the season. And I watched Stroud 7 or 8 games in a row last summer from his rookie year. I couldn't help but notice Tunsil, the fact that no one got close to Stroud that Tunsil was blocking. He just looked like it was easy. You know, he almost reminded me at times, he doesn't look the same, but just the way it looked easy, of Joe Thomas, where it looked like it was just a walk in the park, just blocking these guys. And this year it wasn't like that.
You know, Greg, there's 2 ways to look at this. You know, sometimes your favorite phrase is reasonable people can disagree, right? And I like to say 2 things can be true at one time. It could be possible that Tunsil is no longer an elite level left tackle. He may have the traits, but something's changed with him.
Right.
But at the same token, the Commanders could say having him at left tackle and now Brandon Coleman moving to left guard where he should play, no matter what, even at they are now, is still better than what they were doing last year, which was having Coleman play left tackle. And I think Allegretti was left guard.
Allegretti, Allegretti's one of those tough guys. You like to have him on your team. In an ideal world, you'd probably like to be better just from a talent standpoint. Mm-hmm. But, one thing I learned, Jeff, and it's funny you mentioned this. One thing I learned years and years ago when I first started, evaluating college players, going back a long time, and I got way too caught up with interior offensive linemen in trying to decide how athletic they were. And I had to learn that that's not what it's about. It's great if they have light feet and all that cool stuff. But, for interior O-linemen, it's just getting the guy blocked. Mm-hmm. It's not a swimsuit contest. You don't have to look pretty. And Allegretti's one of those guys. He's doesn't have the talent that you would ideally like if you're drawing up, a left guard. But he's one of those tough guys. My guess is he's a tone setter in that O-line room. And, those guys are hard to get out of the lineup. Now, I think they prefer Coleman to be the guy because he's got more talent. But sometimes you don't get guys like Allegretti out of the lineup so fast.
One thing
Adam,
we should mention.
Who's your favorite guy, Adam? Is it Greg Van Roten? You love to point him out as a guy who's not going to
It's funny because Greg Van Roten from Penn. But I'm sure if you talk to the Commanders, they would tell you if you look at their line last season, they got the job done. Obviously, they overachieved. Other than Cosby, who tore his ACL, I wanted to get to that. You look at their line, you go, wow, they're not very talented, but they overachieved. They just get the job done with hand usage. Knowing where you need to go, finding a way. Greg nailed it. That coaches around the National Football League who coach offensive linemen, they love guys who are tough that know who they are. And just like Nick Gates is another guy who Eagles cut.
They all teach technique. We've all been at training camps, and I've been fortunate in my career to be able to stand right next to offensive line coaches. I remember doing that with Jim McNally 100 years ago.
Yeah. Wow.
And you see these guys go really deep into hand placement. If it's 2 inches off, they tell you. If your left foot is 3 inches off, they tell you. But then when you get in the game and you're trying to block, Jalen Carter, you know what? The goal is to get him blocked.
Yeah, you don't care how you do
not to, say, oh, well, coach, I put my hand here. That doesn't matter. Just get the guy blocked, And Allegretti's one of those kinds of guys.
Nice.
Greg, let's move on to Jevon Kinlaw. I was a little surprised by the money the Commanders gave him, but, he's obviously been with a former first-round pick from South Carolina, didn't make it with the 49ers, spent a year with the Jets. So what do you see in his tape?
Kinlaw is another one of those guys that when you watched his tape coming out of college and at times in the league with the 49ers and elsewhere, there are snaps where you go, this guy should be a really, really good player. He's long, he's athletic, he's strong. I mean, I remember seeing snapshots of him where he just moved people. And again, I can't speak to why the consistency in his ability to do that is not there. I can't speak to that. I don't know. But he has big-time traits. Don't forget, the Niners initially, they traded DeForest Buckner to draft him. And they thought he'd be that guy. And while he had moments, it didn't work. Can I mention, Jeff, one guy that they signed that I think is one of my favorite guys that maybe a lot of people don't know about?
Jonathan Jones?
No, Dietrich Wise.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, the former Patriot, right?
Dietrich Wise, for whatever reason, even when the Patriots haven't been good the last couple of years, I saw their defense a lot. It just because maybe the division, seeing the Bills, seeing the Dolphins, I just ended up seeing their defense a lot. And over these last number of years, I just think Dietrich Wise is a really, really good player. Mm-hmm. You can play him at tackle. You can play him inside. He's long. He's athletic. He's productive. He's just one of those guys that not a lot of people are going to know about. It's an under-the-radar signing that I think is a really, really good signing.
Yeah, and they've got Payne, they've got Newton, the first-round pick from last year.
Who played a lot this year. I mean, he played a lot of snaps.
And then, of course, go ahead, Adam.
I was going to say, they did sign Jonathan Jones, another former Patriot, Greg.
Yes.
Who's up there? Who's up there? Is he more of a nickel at this point?
That's really interesting because I'll admit I was wrong. I didn't think Mike Sainristil could play on the outside in the NFL, and he essentially, I believe he's going to stay out there. So it's going to be Sainristil and Lattimore, assuming health with Lattimore. You never know. But I think they personally, and my guess is Jones will play in the slot, but that's my
smaller
sense.
player. Yeah.
By the way, Will Harris is another one of those veteran safeties.
Yeah.
He's a really solid, at some point, not everybody's a superstar, guys. We know that. So, you look at these guys like the Will Harrises of the world, solid, savvy veteran, knows how to play, can play in multiple spots. These are good signings. These are veteran players that know how to play.
All right, let's move on to the Cowboys. And this guy I know we've talked to you about Kenneth Murray before, Greg, over the years, now traded to the Cowboys. Basically, the Titans were trying to move his contract. They got very little in return, but they were able to move him. He's now with the Cowboys. Greg, what are your thoughts on Kenneth Murray?
Kenneth Murray's a guy that has always frustrated me, Adam, because he was in the same draft with Patrick Queen.
Yep.
And I thought Kenneth Murray was a far more talented athletic player than Queen. I've turned out to be, well, he is, but I've turned out to be wrong. He's not as good a player, but I loved Murray coming out of Oklahoma, and he just has issues with key and diagnose, to use the term that's often used. He just doesn't see it the right way, because this guy is 6'3", 245. He can run, he can hit, if you look at a linebacker, you think that's what a linebacker should look like. But, look, if he was great with Tennessee, they wouldn't be getting rid of him, because they didn't have, just think, they got rid of Kenneth Murray to sign Cody Barton. So just think about that. And Cody Barton is another one of those solid veteran pros. This is no knock on Cody Barton, but Kenneth Murray is an athletic stud, and it hasn't worked. It didn't work with the Chargers, who had a great defensive coach there in Staley. So, the guy, for whatever reason, he just doesn't see it the way you have to see it.
Yeah. And speaking of not working, it did not work out well for Kaiir Elam in Buffalo, but the Cowboys trade for him, Elam.
And I'll tell you what I think of that, if that's okay.
Yeah. I'm wondering where you think they're going to play him.
Well, you got to understand a couple things. Elam is a pure man coverage corner. He has no zone instincts whatsoever, and the Bills are a heavy zone team. And the times Elam played, they almost had to play man because he can't play zone. Again, I don't know the reason why. I'm not in his head. I'm not there. The Bills have a great coaching staff, and it didn't work, okay? Because the Bills have taken a lot of defensive players who were not high draft choices, and they've become really, really good players. Milano, Bernard, Christian Benford, a lot of really good players that, were not high picks, and they couldn't get through to Elam. So, who's supposed to be a great kid, by the way. No knock on Elam. It just, maybe he doesn't see the game that way. But the point is, I was not surprised at all when I saw that trade. But the reason I mentioned it is the Cowboys play a ton more man coverage than the Bills do. So I'm not saying he's going to step in and be a starter and be a great player, but he's in a better situation to where, his traits fit with what they want to do, because he can't play zone.
My memory is jogged. Adam, who is the new defensive coordinator for the Cowboys?
For the Cowboys,
it's Eberflus, isn't it?
Eberflus, yeah, who runs a
40.
Maybe he won't play as much, but who knows? But
Yeah.
obviously, they wouldn't have traded for him if they didn't think. And again, they didn't give up a ton, but they have the guy's got traits. He was a first-round pick, and his traits were really good coming out of Florida.
Right.
Nice.
Awesome.
Nice.
All right. So go ahead, Adam.
I'm just going to say, there's a guy, Greg, you mentioned years ago, and then he wound up kind of not playing much or not starting. Is Jack Sanborn? Remember him?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on him? Now he's with the Cowboys.
You know what? I did him coming out of Wisconsin, and he was your classic Wisconsin linebacker, just super solid. I thought he was an initial free agent, Adam, coming out.
Yeah, well, not drafted coming out of.
He was a draftable player, and the year that who was the linebacker, the really good linebacker that got hurt in Chicago? Was it Roquan Smith a few years ago? Who got hurt in Chicago a few years ago, and Sanborn had to come in and play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah, and Sanborn came in and played like the last 7 games as a starter, and I thought he was good. And this year, obviously, when they signed Edmonds and Edwards, Sanborn became the third linebacker, so he only played when they were at base. But I always thought he was a good player. Now, again, I'm not charting every play, so I'm not going to sit here and say he should or shouldn't be a starter. I can't say that. But he always looked like he should be on the field to me. So who knows what their linebacker situation is going to be, because Overshone is coming off an ACL, right?
Yeah, he's been hurt a lot, unfortunately. Yeah.
So who knows? They played the Liufa kid, the Notre Dame kid. I don't know what they think of him. I didn't study him in detail, so I don't have any wonderful opinion on him one way or the other. Obviously, they feel they needed that position to at least get competition because now they have Murray and Sanborn. And the guy who I don't know what happened to him because he played literally every snap 2 years ago is Damone Clark, who's still there. I don't know what happened to him. He didn't play this year, basically, and he wasn't hurt.
Maybe Zimmer just didn't see the value in him that DQ did.
Sometimes the new coaching staff, that's the thing now with the new coaching staff is you just don't know.
Absolutely. All right, last team.
You also signed Peyton Turner from New Orleans.
Oh, yeah.
Who's barely played due to injury, Greg.
Yeah, right? Who's kind of an interesting because they lost to Marcus Lawrence. Seattle's going to be a fascinating team this year. Not that we're going to get into Seattle, but they're going to be a fascinating team this year.
Next week we will.
Yeah. Next episode we'll go around the NFL a little bit more with you. But yeah, what I remember you liked Peyton Turner coming out of Houston. Just did not. He had some injury issues, Adam, right? With the Saints.
A ton. Yeah.
The thing about guys like Peyton Turner and this, those guys have to be great with speed to power because he's not twitchy and he's not sudden. He's not going to win that way. So those guys have to be able to play powerfully. And he's been hurt a lot. It just hasn't worked. But there's something there. You never know. Those guys, it's those kinds of guys you just never know because there's something there. So sometimes a change of scenery, helps those guys.
All right, let's move on to the last team here. The Giants are having an interesting offseason. Cornerback Paulson Adebo, they signed him in free agency, and safety JevonHolland. Adebo from the Saints, Holland from the Dolphins. I do recall us talking about Adebo in past shows when the Eagles would play the Saints, and he's got some abilities.
Yeah. Well, it's a good move for the Giants. I mean, they needed a veteran presence. Adebo's one of those savvy players, really good. He can play man, he can play zone because Dennis Allen did that in New Orleans, so he has experience playing both. I'm sure they feel because of the kind of kid he is that he can help Deonte Banks, who's got ridiculous traits but has been so inconsistent and at times problematic. But the guy has ridiculously good man coverage traits, and you're hoping that now in his, third year, I believe, coming up, that, that he can develop into that guy. And JevonHolland, he may not have had his best season this past year, but JevonHolland is a 5-tool safety. He's got every single trait that you want in a safety. In fact, I've had conversations with coaches who think that in terms of pure traits, that the two best safeties in the league are Holland and Fitzpatrick. So Holland is that level of traits. I don't know what happened in Miami this past year, but obviously, he just signed a contract. We'll see, what Shane Bowen can get out of him in New York, the DC. But he's really a high-level player in terms of his physical abilities.
All right, and then they drafted Tyler Nubin last year. It seems like the guys
he was good and he was really solid.
Right, it feels like they were trying to pair some good heady veterans like Adebo and Holland with their young guys like Nubin and Banks and see what they can get out of that.
And basically their front group is the same. I mean, they didn't really make any changes there.
All right. Great stuff. That is going to do it. That wraps up our first episode of the Intel with Greg Cosell for 2025. We did Eagles free agent signings, NFC East acquisitions. On the next one we do, I'm sure the Eagles have made some more moves and the NFL had made more moves, and we will go over those with you in that episode, Greg. So for Greg Cosell and Adam Kaplan, I'm Jeff Mosher. You have been watching the Intel with Greg Cosell.